Welcome, everyone. I'd like to call to order the August 29th, 2023 SFO Airport Community Roundtable Technical Working Group meeting at 3:32 p.m. We are meeting in person at the Foster City Council Chambers Conference Room and virtually via Zoom. Joining us today are staff of the Roundtable, Kathleen Wentworth, Roundtable Coordinator, Angela Montes, Roundtable Administrative Secretary, and Eugene Reindell, HMMH Technical Consultant to the Roundtable. We also have present with us Mr. Paul Hanna, Consultant Chief Airspace and Flight Operation Engineer, SFO. And will be joining us in a little bit shortly, Mr. Bert, SFO Airport Noise Office Manager. Kathleen, anyone else with us who we need to
Angela, maybe
recognize?
Yes, with us today is Moifer Chin, Community Engagement Officer from the FAA, Nupur Sinha, Director of Planning and Environmental Affairs, SFO, Christian Valdez, Senior Managing Consultant from SFO, Paul Hanna, SFO GBAS team, and Lisa Aldaza from San Mateo County.
Thank you so much, Angela. And then moving on to roll call, Kathleen.
Roll call. Chair Sam Hindy.
Here.
Member Judith Haskell. Member Terry O'Connell. Member Ricardo Ortiz. Roundtable member Al Royce.
Present.
We do not have a quorum.
That's okay. I mean, we wish we did, but we could still conduct the business or the meeting today, not necessarily taking action. I don't think there's any action items on the agenda to begin with, but hopefully members will be joining us during the meeting. If not, we'll go ahead and move on. Moving on to the next item on the agenda is public comment. This is a time for members of the public who would like to speak on an item that's not on the agenda. And I will turn it over to Angela to let the public know how they could participate in public comments.
Thank you, Chair Handy. For those attending in person, there are speaker slips on the table by the entry door, which we do not have any members in person. For those attending the meeting on Zoom video conference, we will use the raise hand feature in order to organize any public comments. During the general public comment period and for each item on the regular agenda, I will ask those members of the public who wish to comment to click the raise hand feature to speak on that agenda item. For those joining by phone, please press *9 to indicate your desire to speak. When you hear your name called, I will prompt you to unmute your microphone and inform you that you may begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes. Please note that members of the public must wait for the prompt in connection with each agenda item before using the raise hand feature. Written comments submitted in advance will be acknowledged by staff during discussion of the appropriate agenda item. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. Do we have any members of the public who would like to speak?
Yes. Yes, Chairman, we have one virtual hand raised from Jennifer Landisman. Give me 1 second to share my timer. Ms. Landisman?
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Hindy and the committee. I was interested in finding out more about the new community engagement officer. There has been a lot of turnover in this position over the years, and I think it would be really helpful to have some sort of update on what the community engagement officer does and how this office engages with the public. Is it only with the SFO roundtable? Do they accept inquiries directly or to have meetings with community groups or other members of the public? You know, it's always been a vague position. It was kind of funny. I heard Gene Reindell say some people thought that the community engagement officer was going to be the ombudsman. And in a way, yes, because there was legislation to have an ombudsman, and instead of an ombudsman, we got a community engagement officer. But we had very specific ideas when we asked for that legislation that passed, which is that we wanted to have a way to engage with the FAA because the FAA only did it through roundtables. And for those of us that don't have a roundtable, we wanted to know how the community engagement officer or the ombudsman could work with us. So I'd love if the new person is there. I think it'd be great for them to introduce themselves, maybe a little bit more formally with a letter, because not everybody attends these meetings. And then that way we could let, more people who might be interested understand what this position is all about, and also to kind of inform our comments for the Federal Register. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your comments, Ms. Hampton. As you know, during public comment, we don't usually engage the public and, kind of respond, but your comment has been received, and we will definitely address it with staff and see how we could move forward, whether the community engagement officer could kind of respond to you or whether staff could respond to you. But thank you for your comments.
And with that, Chairman, we have no further hands raised for items not on the agenda.
Thank you so much, Angela. And then moving on to the first item on our agenda, ground-based augmentation system update, GBAS update. As you all know, the SFO GBAS team continues to work towards implementation of this required flight approach procedure to SFO. This afternoon, we will receive a brief update from Paul Hanna, SFO Consultant Chief Airspace and Flight Operation Officer. Paul, hi, good afternoon, good to see you again.
Hey, good afternoon. Thank you so much for the opportunity to brief you all on the status of the project. I'm going to share my screen just real quickly. I wanted to check if my audio is coming through clearly.
Yes, we can hear you.
Perfect.
Can you go louder?
A little louder.
I can speak a bit louder if that helps. Is that better?
That would definitely help.
The owl's not working.
Technology kind of limiting us a little bit, so if you could speak louder, that'd be wonderful.
I accept the challenge. I'll do my best. All right, so I am going to share my screen. So on the screen right now is a copy of the PDF that we sent out in advance of the meeting. And there are 3 topics that we'd like to cover with today's briefing. First, just a quick review of the timeline for our Group 1 and Group 2A GLS procedures. The Group 1 procedures are currently under development by the FAA and are slated for publication coming up in March of next year. And then we'll also talk about the timeline for our feedback, or trying to get feedback from members of the public on our Group 2A innovative procedures. The second thing we'd like to cover with our brief update here today is just a quick overview of the requests and the submissions and great ideas that we've gotten both from the Roundtable and from other cities in the Bay Area and other residents living in the vicinity of the airport. So we've actually gotten quite a few really great suggestions. We have a few new ones that we wanted to just make sure that everybody was aware of here for the SFO Roundtable Technical Working Group. And then we'll finish up with our next steps. And I respect that there's a lot of things on the agenda here today other than GBAS, so I'll try to go quickly through these as best I can. On the screen right now is a kind of a long view on our timeline for both implementing and reviewing and developing the innovative GLS procedures. So the top line that you see here with all the blue dots and a couple of dark gray dots, those are our intended touch points for opportunities we have to either discuss and interact on innovative procedures, or coming up in March of 2024, start to report out on how the first group of innovative procedures are performing. As a reminder, from the point at which that first group of innovative procedures is published and ready for air carriers and air traffic stakeholders to start using, it's going to take us a little bit of time to accurately collect the noise information from the portable noise monitors and attribute it back to the correct aircraft that are actually flying GLS procedures versus those that are not. So even though the procedures are slated to go live in March of 2024, there will be a little bit of time between that point and our first opportunity to give meaningful information about what they look like in terms of how aircraft are flying them, how the pilots are reacting to them, and certainly importantly, what kind of noise information we're getting from the portable noise monitor. So it could take us maybe 30, 60, or even 90 days to get to that point. So We do anticipate, therefore, a couple of significant updates starting in the second quarter of 2024 to talk about what we're seeing from the data for that first group of innovative procedures. Equally important is our current engagement on the Group 2A innovative procedures that is still ongoing. Our desire is to try to get as much feedback as possible, both from the SFO Roundtable and this technical working group, but also other residents of the Bay. And our goal is to try to get as much of that feedback as possible by the end of this year, because it's going to take about 2 years, most likely, possibly longer, maybe shorter, but usually it takes a bit longer to get those procedures developed, to have them undergo the FAA's environmental review, and then be ready for publication. And if we are able to get that feedback and make a submission at the end of this year, we would anticipate those procedures to be available at the earliest by the end of 2025. So the sooner we can get to the right procedures to request, the sooner we can get to some of these more innovative and potentially more noise beneficial procedures in the 2A group. So that's the long view. Really quickly, the next couple of slides I have is very quick and mechanical. For those of you that are looking at the FAA's Instrument Flight Procedure Gateway, which is a website that's available online, you will see a number of the GLS procedures that are coming up for publication. Some of these are Group 1 procedures. Some of these are other procedures that are going to be aligned with the GLS Group 1 procedures. So in particular, we have 2 of the Group 1 procedures coming up to runways 10 left and 10 right at the airport. And there is still a desire for the FAA to align and slightly modify the existing RNAV, GPS, and RMP approaches to make them all the same. There may still be some very minor modifications to these procedures, and we'll know more about that. Actually, we have a flight procedure subcommittee meeting coming up this week, and we hope to report out on any of those possible tweaks or modifications in the upcoming technical working groups through the remainder of the year. So we'll keep everybody posted on that. But at a minimum, those are looking for publication on the 21st of March, 2024. The other group of procedures that you see here are the remainder of the Group 1 innovative procedures. This includes the bridge visual version, the down the bay approach, the conversion of the tiptoe, and a slight renumbering of the overlay procedure. And I want to be very explicit. There is no change to the current overlay GLS procedure that's out there. It does have to get an alphabetical identifier. So you'll see in the IFP gateway that there are these procedures called GLS Zulu, runway 28 left, and GLS Zulu, runway 28 right. Those are the same procedures that are being flown today. They're just getting an alphabetical identifier because when you start to have multiple GLS procedures to the same runway, the FAA requires that we use an alphabetical identifier to differentiate them. So those are included in that update. There's nothing changing about those particular procedures, just an identifier so that air traffic can sort them out. The last thing we want to point out is there was one innovative Group 1 procedure that unfortunately is not going to make the March of 2024 publication. It has been slipped to December of next year. That is the GLS uniform, which is the overlay of the existing RNAV RNP Yankee. Both procedures are going to be slightly modified so that they laterally sit on top of each other, but the GLS uniform is going to continue forward with the higher minimum altitudes over South Bay cities in particular. It's just going to take a little bit more time. There's a slight software change the FAA has to implement for procedure design in order to accommodate the creativity that's going into these procedures. So that's the Group 1 procedures. Just as a quick reminder, when those procedures publish, that is the point at which the Noise Abatement Office is going to deploy the portable noise monitors. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this today. I think we've talked about this in the past, but there are at least 3 target locations that we are looking at, in particular in the areas you see there on the map to the right. So those will also be supplemented by our permanent monitoring sites, including Site 12 by Foster City. And this will begin the process coming up in March when we are actively monitoring not only the data we get from the portable noise monitors, but also the data and feedback we're getting from our air traffic stakeholders and our airlines to compare how the aircraft are flying the procedures in addition to the noise data. And then we will plan to put that out in our portable GBAS or portable noise monitoring GBAS report, which will come out a little bit later in the second quarter, most likely of 24 for our first edition of that.
May I get you back to the previous slide, not this one. You mentioned about a couple of approaches being delayed till December
Yes.
because they can be modified. I'm sorry. What is the modification? Is that going to impact anything, or what is it we're looking at?
Oh yeah, thank you for the question. Sorry, I should have paused, or I can't see hands raised, so I thank you for interjecting. So in this case, there is a small technical challenge where the GLS uniform and the RMP Yankee procedure switch from basically making a bunch of straight lines into curved segments. It is relatively close to the airport. And one of the things that we need to change is the last waypoint before the procedure starts to make its curved kind of alignment with the runway needs to shift outwards away from the shoreline by about 200 or 300 feet. So it's a very small change, but what the FAA procedure development team has discovered is that if they move that existing waypoint just a little bit further away, then they can get both the GLS uniform and the RNAV RMP procedure to basically line up, and the same waypoints can be used. So we will produce an updated community flight procedure package when we have this new waypoint identified. But I think so that is to say, there is going to be a slight change to how this procedure looks in the CFPP. We are expecting that the calculated noise change may actually be beneficial because it's just going another 200 to 300 feet away from where it is today. Does that answer your question, Chair Hindi?
It does, but I have clarification question follow-up if you don't mind. Is that shifting east or shifting west? That means those existing waypoints.
Further into the bay itself. So
east.
Yes, east. Yeah. Well,
Thank
I guess north technically, but yeah. Yeah.
Away from us.
A little bit, just a little bit. I don't know. The calculated noise will likely show a very, very small change. But we're going to do our best to capture that and put out updated CFPPs as soon as that changed waypoint has been identified by the FAA.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yep. Okay. Other questions before I go on to the Group 2A stuff?
Anyone? We're good. Thank you.
Great. So the other things that we'd like to brief folks on is the current timeline and status for our 2A procedures. As you can see on this particular slide, there are 6 Group 2A concepts that we have out for review with members of the public and with the Roundtable Technical Working Group. They are, I think we've spent some time going over them in the past. I do want to clarify, and I'll say it here and I'll say it again kind of at the end. We have number 5 and 6 that you see here on this slide, the GLS OW1 and OW2. The goal for those 2 procedures, if both of them appear to be acceptable to this technical working group and other members of the public, we are seeking feedback to know which one is the preferred option, because we don't plan to request them both. We plan to request just one of those. So just something to keep in mind, that we're not planning to go forward with both 5 and 6. We're just going to go forward with the preferred option if both of them are found to be acceptable for further development. These procedures, we are collecting feedback right now from members of the public, and to facilitate that collection of information, we have updated the SFO GBAS website with some additional information, and that's what I want to share with folks here very briefly. So one thing that we've done is a broad scale update to all of our community flight procedure packages. This is both the Group 1 packages and the Group 2A packages. And there's 2 things that we've done to all of them. The first is that in our community flight procedure packages, as you'll see on the graphic on the right-hand side of the screen, we included some sample points. We picked out some points of significance, in the Bay Area. Sometimes it's at a waypoint, sometimes it's at a noise monitor. Previously, we had been showing calculated SEL dBA values out to 1/100th of a decibel. We got feedback that was maybe a little bit misleading or difficult to interpret. And so what we've done is we've rounded all of those values up to the nearest 10th, both on the charts that you see there on the lower right and on our summary tables. And again, that's been done for all of the CFPPs. We've also added a disclaimer, which came about from some of the great questions we've gotten from the community about the accuracy of calculations made by the Aviation Environmental Design tool. And as great of a tool as it might be, and as cutting edge as it could be for modeling aviation noise, it does have some bounds on its calculations, which I think we revealed were in some cases as high as plus or minus 3 dBA SEL. And so what we've done is we've added that disclaimer to our general disclaimer section in all CFPPs. Not something we want to hide, just something we want to make sure everyone is aware of when they're looking at these potential noise changes. Another thing that we've done is we have added 2 additional community flight procedure packages. They are for the GLS OW1 and OW2 procedures, but they are specifically intended to compare that procedure to the existing ILS or localizer procedure that's out there today. So what you see here on this second image here as an example is what it looks like on the website right now. And you'll see that there are now 2 completely unique sets of information available for members of the public to peruse. The first set is the original CFPP that we put out, which compares the GLS OW1 as an example to the upcoming GLS uniform to runway 28 right. One of the challenges with that is that GLS uniform, at Chair Hindi, to your question earlier, is one of the procedures that is potentially going to change, and it's not going to be published now until December of 2024. Which means that members of the public may not have an opportunity, or certainly won't have an opportunity this year, to have experienced what that procedure is going to sound like, and then kind of compare how the noise might change to this future Group 2A concept. And so what we've decided to do is produce a new community flight procedure package, keep the old one, but also make an additional one, which compares the OW1 concept against an existing approach that members of the public do have some experience listening to, which is the ILS or localizer runway 28 left. So we've done this for GLS OW1. We've done this for GLS OW2. We've also updated the website so that if you go to the interactive contour section, you will see SEL and LMAX information, and you will see all the same detailed population level information that we did before. So all of that has been generated just for these 2 procedures, and we hope that it's very useful in helping both members of the technical working group and members of the public to provide feedback and weigh in on which one they think might be acceptable, and certainly which one they think is better. The other section that I wanted to cover is just a quick rundown of all of the recommended procedures or concepts that have come both from this technical working group and from the city of Palo Alto in the next slide, and other residents of South Bay cities, and actually we've had recommendations now from East Bay and South Bay, and I think one from North Bay as well. So we're doing our best in these 2 slides to kind of summarize what those all look like. On this particular slide are many of the suggestions that have come specifically from the Roundtable Technical Working Group. The green ones are those that have been converted into procedures that are currently being reviewed as Group 2A. The white ones we are excited to review in the next phase of our GBAS project, which is looking at them either in Group 2B or 3, which will be in just at least a year or 2 from now. But basically, we want to get through the Group 2A procedures first, and then we'll start looking at 2B. The yellow ones are great ideas that have come up, but which were identified to be beyond the GBAS project scope at this time, or as number 6 came up, is one where we're waiting for some additional safety criteria to be identified by the FAA before we take that back to our flight procedures subcommittee. One important step here is that you'll see number 5, which was a suggestion for changes to arrivals from the Southeast. Even though this was considered to be beyond the GBAS project scope, I'm pleased to suggest that the airport has initiated a formal IFP gateway request for the FAA to look into that, separate from the GBAS project in July of 2023. So we're very excited that one will continue to be explored. However, it's just going to be separate from the GBAS project. The next slide, which I'm not sure how many of you on the technical working group may have seen just yet, contains many of the recommendations that have come either specifically from the city of Palo Alto and some of the residents that have been supporting it, or other residents more broadly in the South Bay cities area. And some of these are, again, great suggestions. Some of them, as you can see in yellow, have at this time been identified to be outside the GBAS project scope. One of them was identical, in fact, to the Roundtable Technical Working Group suggestion to look for changes to arrivals from the southeast. This was the suggestion to try late at night to get aircraft that would have taken the Surfer to maybe consider switching them over to an Oakland arrival path called the EMZO, which would take them over the full length of the bay from the south. Again, that one is going to be explored separate from the GBAS project team. The other concepts here are some of them are slightly older or from earlier in the project, looking at opportunities to switch the leading and trailing runways using GLS technology to safely potentially raise the altitude profile of aircraft coming into 28 left. There were other suggestions that we reviewed during our meeting with Palo Alto about potential changes to the Pirate Star. And what the GLS could do on that frontier. And very importantly is one I want to just speak to very quickly, which is 6, 7, and 8, which is a request to take a look at the down the bay approaches, the one coming up in March, the one that's being evaluated right now as a Group 2A concept, and the bridge visual to see if they could be implemented as GLS procedures to 28 left. We've discussed this with our flight procedures subcommittee, and we have an interesting, ran into an interesting scenario on this one, and we just wanted to kind of explain the process. So right now, the feedback we got from the subcommittee is it's either likely to fall into what we term the Group 2 process, which is where we look for increased utilization, or the 2B process. And the primary challenge that the subcommittee identified with using GLS procedures to 28 left is that 28 left in the daytime is heavily used for vectoring and creating space for other aircraft that stay strictly on the instrument of procedures to 28 right. So as an example, if we get a lot of aircraft that are successfully using the new down the bay approach like the GLS Whiskey, one thing that air traffic is going to do is they're going to create some of that spacing that allows those aircraft to come down the bay by vectoring airplanes through air traffic instructions to 28 left. And so there was a little bit of there's a little bit of concern from the flight procedure subcommittee about introducing too many procedures to 28 left that they are concerned may not be utilized in the daytime in particular. Because of the need to vector aircraft as opposed to put them on procedures. So we do have a few procedures that go to 28 left in Group 1, but those are procedures that are commonly cleared. So the feedback we got is it may work, but what it may require is additional staffing for our air traffic controllers, which is something a little bit beyond our control, which would put it into a 2B category. Or it may be that we need to start using these Group 1 procedures first, identify how much vectoring is required for these 28 left aircraft. And then if we have that confidence from our air traffic and airline stakeholders, we can request the FAA to add 28 left to those 3 procedures. And it could be something of an abbreviated process, but we won't know until we get that data and feedback first. And what that process looks like is here on slide 12. So this is maybe a familiar looking slide where we've talked about the process, like this is our Group 2 process for increasing utilization. We had originally envisioned this process for identifying GLS procedures, which are performing very well. They're achieving the project goals, noise reduction, ILS redundancy, efficiency, and delay reduction. If they're achieving those goals and there's ways to convert them into procedures that are more usable by other kinds of aircraft operators that maybe aren't GLS capable, this was something like the process we were planning on following. And what we've talked about with the subcommittee is using a similar process where the subcommittee meets to look at the safety and the utilization of adding 28 left to these other existing procedures. And then if that looks like it's technically feasible, we would then bring that back to the public to inform all of you there here at the Roundtable Technical Working Group and other members of the public to say, this is something we'd like to do. That would be put forward for public review and feedback. If it's acceptable to move forward, the airport would then request that those runways get added to those procedures and we would move forward. So this is the process that is currently being recommended to us right now. It does have the side effect that we do need to gather data first for those three procedures, the down the bay one, and the bridge visual from Eddie, to make sure again that it is working the way that our air traffic and airline stakeholders would want to see before adding it in. If it's there, then we could start the public feedback process and add them in and have the confidence of knowing that they can safely be used in the daytime in particular. The one other reason why we're not talking about this at nighttime is because 28 left is not part of the noise abatement program for nighttime. It's primarily just 28 right. So I know I've thrown a lot of information to everybody, but just really quickly, go ahead, please. Question.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I do have a question on this very thing that you're talking about down the bay, 28 left. But before I do that, I see Gene got his hand up. Gene, you have a question?
Yes, thank you. My question is many slides back, Paul. It's about the accuracy of the SDL noise results. Yeah, there. And you said it's as much as 3 dB, and I'm wondering if that is on the SEL or on the difference in SEL, because I know you can have 3 dB in SEL and 3 dB in SEL, but when you're really looking at the difference, it could be a lot more accurate. So I was curious what that accuracy was related to.
That's a great question. And I may, if Christian, if you're available, I might pass this one to you if you have a moment to take it.
Hi, Gene. That comes from the SAE ARP 4271, part 1. That's relative to the accuracy of the model calculations.
So that is the accuracy in the calculation of SEL, but when you're comparing two procedures and you're using the same profiles and things like that into the model, I would suspect that the accuracy would be not that 3 dB because it's a difference rather than an absolute.
Well, it's just the calculation of each SEL that the model calculates.
Okay, so the 3 dB accuracy is on the calculation of the actual SEL for each of the procedures.
Right.
Got it. Thanks.
Great. Thanks for the question. Chair Hindi, was there another question?
Yes, I do. So you're talking about these approaches that considering 28 left and you're going to evaluate them. For us, I mean, I don't know enough about it yet, but for us in Fountain City, when you talk about 28 left, that means more noise, more planes over the city rather than being away from the city.
I see. Yeah, well, I believe so, and I apologize that, you know, the way I have it on this slide, it's quite paraphrased. I think the desire would be that the vertical path that's being used to 28 right would be identically replicated to 28 left. So an aircraft that does ultimately line up for landing on 28 left would be coming in at a higher altitude profile than what they would come in today. At least that would be the goal as we understood it for these community requests. So for instance, you know, the GLS whiskey, it comes in at I think it ultimately finishes at like a 3.1 or I have to refresh my memory on this, something slightly above 3 degrees. That would be the same target glide path angle for 28 left as well. So those aircraft, even when they're very close into the airport, would be coming at a higher altitude in the daytime than other aircraft that might otherwise be landing on 28 left. So I think, you know, we would hope that in that situation, there would still be benefits. But I think I see perhaps your other point that you're making, which is that if some of these procedures were to come into effect, it might encourage more aircraft to use 28 left than might have otherwise used it today. Is that what you're suggesting?
That's exactly my point. And to be honest with you, I mean, every approach that's coming on the left is troublesome for us, without exception. So to add any more, I think especially given the volume that we receive daily, is concerning to say the least. But again, I'm saying this without having enough information before me, so I really don't have the details, but it's important to let you know now, as you starting to look into this, that this is a concern. Anytime you try to utilize more of 28 left is a concern for us.
I appreciate you raising that point. We'll make sure to track that as we continue to discuss this. Again, you know, our workflow, you know, here is our goal is to start with the procedures to 28 right, and then, perform that technical evaluation just to examine, how successful are airline and air traffic stakeholders at creating the separation. Could it happen automatically? So the subcommittee is going to look very technically at this. Can it be done? Can it be done safely? Can it be done repeatedly? And only at that point that we know that we've got the data and the trust from all our stakeholders would we then bring it forward for additional, comment and feedback. But I see your point, Chair. Thanks for bringing that up.
What do you see the benefit? I mean, why are you exploring this? What is the potential benefit of utilizing 28 left rather than 28 right?
So my understanding of these three concepts is that it would, if in the future, if there was a safe way to bring in more aircraft down the bay and have them come in at a higher altitude to runway 28 left, it has the opportunity to alleviate more and more aircraft from kind of certainly the South Bay cities that are already receiving a lot of that vector activity kind of over that area, and some of the cities that are represented here on the roundtable. So I think that might be one of the primary benefits. It could also, in a 2B future, represent new opportunities to basically create like entire arrival streams, potentially. Like for instance, the suggestion for the DB and the DB1, or the down the bay and the down the bay one, if that worked and there was the right level of automation and there was the right level of staffing, at the TRACON to accommodate this, it could really potentially increase, entire flows of aircraft that basically take that path. It couldn't change all the traffic, right? Because aircraft that don't start their journey from, the north or the northwest, they're going to come from a very different direction where they couldn't use those procedures. So I do see those benefits. I think the potential benefit for the bridge visual, and just to comment on that one really quickly. So the genesis of the bridge visual to 28 right is actually the FMS bridge visual, which is a third-party procedure that's maintained by a lead carrier, not the FAA, and distributed to other participating airlines. Today, that procedure only exists to 28 right. So, participating air carriers that use that named kind of special procedure, the FMS bridge visual, they're only flying it to 28 right. The quiet bridge, which is the charted visual flight procedure, is actually published to both 28 left and 28 right. So my understanding for this concept that's been suggested by the community is that, if it was working very well to 28 right, because the altitudes are higher, for aircraft coming in, for those planes that would have used the quiet bridge to 28 left, they could instead potentially use like the bridge visual as a slightly better path to do it. But that's my understanding at this time, Chair Hindy.
Okay, thank you for allowing me
Through
to
the
share.
chair, if I may, Paul, the bridge visual is an offset approach. So that's a good thing, keeping it over the bay. And the other thing I see with down the bays is perhaps the FAA may be bringing in an aircraft to the left runway anyway. If they were to be able to do this potentially higher, be preferred over a standard straight in.
Again, I mean, we don't have enough, it's,
No,
I
I understand, but
don't
I'm just
have enough.
bringing up some points.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Go ahead, the people. Anyone else have any questions? I don't think you have seen anything you want to put in.
Just a quick question, Paul. Looking at these P6, 7, and 8 that are the down the bay to the left, you're not anticipating dual 2 at a time down the bay, right?
So it was discussed, it was discussed briefly in our flight procedure subcommittee, if that was the intention. There is a possible distant future state, which is why it falls into the 2B category, where you could conceive of a future where there are kind of aircraft streaming down the bay with the correct separation, but then being split off kind of 28 left and right. That's not possible necessarily as an established flow today, but to Bert's point, sometimes aircraft that are brought down the bay, like on the vectors maneuver, when they get very close to the final approach, there might be some reason why they were planning to land on 28 right, but they need to split off the 28 left. And if they saw that coming, they could have these opportunities to kind of put them on the approach earlier, as opposed to taking vector maneuvers late in the arrival. So, but to answer your question, it is something we're looking at, but it would likely only happen in a Mars-enabled future, which the FAA is not ready for just yet. That's something that we're excited to participate in a trial for, but it would probably have to come along with Mars-level technology. Does that kind of answer your question?
I guess it does. I think the concern that I think is evident is that there would be a temptation perhaps to use the 2-8 down the bay to 2-8 left when they could just as easily use it down the bay to 2-8 right and solve all everybody's problems, or at least to a great
And
extent.
everybody understands Mars.
Well,
Paul, would you mind giving us the acronym MARS, please?
Apologies, I have that bad habit. Yes, MARS stands for the Multiple Airport Route Separation. And this is the concept that aircraft that are navigating under, very precise navigational methods. So RNP, GLS, and in this case, RNP to GLS, can achieve kind of safe, reduced separation from, RNP and GLS procedures into other airports in the Bay, like Oakland or San Jose as an example. And one of the main reasons why the down the Bay procedure has kind of a limit today on how much it can be used is because of the need to maintain separation from Oakland aircraft that are arriving and departing and San Francisco departures that are heading out. So in that Mars-enabled future, the down the Bay path may become more and more viable, specifically for San Francisco, just to get aircraft kind of lined up with both 2-8 right and 2-8 left. Does that, Bert, I hope that helps.
Yeah, I was just gonna be able to say multiple airport route separation, but you did it all. Thanks.
Sorry.
thank you, Paul.
Sure. Other questions from the room?
I don't see any. Thank you.
So, yeah, and just to wrap up, so the last thing, and I thank you so much for the additional time. I really appreciate it. The next steps that we've got right now, you did hear me mention that there are some small tweaks that the Flight Procedure Subcommittee and primarily the FAA are working on right now relative to the GLS uniform, which is the RNP Yankee approach to 2-8 right. That one's slated for publication in December of next year, and some very small modifications to the GLS approaches to 10 right and 10 left. As soon as we have that information, which we don't have right now, we will commit to making updates to our community flight procedure packages and our information on the website, and to brief it out with all of you if there's an available time for the next TWG meeting that's closest to when that occurs. The next thing we want to do for our next steps is we really want to encourage both the TWG and the full roundtable to provide your feedback and be hopefully ready to give us your official position on which procedures you all would like us to take forward as part of our Group 2A by December of this year. That will help us keep on track for that end of 2025 publication. And again, just as a reminder, it is our goal, if both the OW1 and the OW2 look acceptable, to please also provide the feedback about which is the preferred option between the two of them. That's all I had for today. So thank you very much, and I'm available to take questions.
Well, thank you, Paul. I think we interrupted you many times, but I thought it was important to kind of not let you go too far ahead and bring you back. I appreciate the presentation, as always, very informative. I do have a reservation, I share them with you. Reiterate them. But let me see if anyone has any further questions in the room, and then we'll move to the public. Vice Chair Al or Kathleen. We got none here. Perhaps, thank you so much. Let's turn it over to the public and see if anyone has a question for you.
Yes.
Montes?
Thank you, Chairman. We do have 2 virtual hands raised. I'll make that 3. I will start with Darlene Yapley, followed by Mary Jo Fremont. Ms. Yapley?
Paul, the slides are not yet posted, so I didn't get a chance to see and know that there were new updates to the CFPP, so my comment might be already addressed. Previously, the CFPP packages showed populations in the contours, but did not show the change in noise. So the population change without the noise data and the city data doesn't really give us input on the impact. So if you have 100 more people at 1 dB and 50 reduced at 2 dB, it's a wash. But of course, we all know, we want to know which communities went up in noise and which communities went down. It's not neutral. So the current packages do not state that. The Roundtable submitted a letter to the FAA on the noise policy review, highlighting 3 things. You want data that evaluates and discloses all the information critical to make decisions and disclose impacts. Transparency is needed early, and averaging metrics do not generally provide the kind of tailored data people are looking for. So in the spirit of the Roundtable's letter, I would like to request that the CFPP packages address the number of people who have more noise, the number of people who have less noise, and to do that by location and the amount of noise, so we really know who's impacted. Secondly, the SFO is committed to decommission any GBAS approaches that create more noise than non-GBAS. SFO does not currently have a plan to address this, to compare single noise events to non-GLS approaches. So you are not complying with the motion. Instead, SFO is averaging metrics, which is not really supported. So in the spirit of the Roundtable's letter, I request that the single noise event comparisons, not averages. Hawaii has average fires, but no, it's one biggie that's a problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Yapley. I will now call on Mary Jo Fremont, followed by Jennifer Landesman. Ms. Fremont?
Thank you. I would like to clarify, I think, some possible misunderstanding on the proposed 28 left approaches. It is not to put more flights on 28 left. These would be during the day. So there are about, 28 right, 28 left are used 50-50. And at night, of course, because of the noise abatement, they go onto 28 right by default. So the challenge here is the mid-peninsula cities get a lot of arrivals, and not just, many cities from the Roundtable gets bothered by the bodega planes. So how do we get noise abatement for planes that are going to go to 28 left? That's really the challenge here. So that was really not the intent, is not to add more to 28 left, because it will only be during daytime, and these planes would have gone to 28 left, because the first assignment is 28 right. So the other thing which I still don't understand is how come the GBAS team can propose a DBAS1, which is another version of DBAS for the innovative approach, without checking that the first DBAS works. I heard maybe, I don't have the slides, I don't have a direct conversation, I can't dialogue with SFO on this. So I can't understand why there are 2 standards here. DBAS1 is proposed as part of Group 2A, even though DBAS is not yet in action. So you don't know if it really works, but you are proposing DBAS1. So why is it that you need to wait for DBAS right to work for DBAS left to be proposed? Again, double standard, it seems completely unfair. Not only that, we are limited to 2 minutes speaking and have no direct conversation with SFO. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fremont. I will now call on our last virtual hand raised, and that is Ms. Landesman.
Hi, thank you. I was encouraged to see that there are proposals there for nighttime mitigation that are not necessarily part of the GBAS project, but that you're exploring, for example, bringing more flights with the full length of the bay. That's been a big issue for me, that I think the relationship with SFO and the FAA should be broad and not just about a specific project and a specific technology. And our biggest worry are I know incremental change is a good word for some people, but incremental change actually is the kind of change that you can't notice what's happening until it's too late. And that's why you have the National Environmental Policy Act, which is to look at cumulative impacts, which are, if we can agree, not being looked at in this project. And we don't understand what the FAA is doing in terms of assessing this. And there, you have your calendar for timeline GBAS. There's no real parallel to see what's happening at the FAA level. So that continues to be a very tough thing. I had heard, I think at the last meeting, that November was a publication date. That should all be clear. Exactly when are you publishing? When did the FAA make the environmental declaration? What are those documents? Because otherwise, this is very, very confusing to see who's doing what. Because the SFO noise assessments that you're doing are all sort of your own thing. It's not vetted. It's not part of a standard. It's not regulated. And so it's like letting the public loose on you. And I like you guys, so I have to cross my fingers, but we need more than this.
Thank you, Ms. Landesman. And with that, Chairman, we have no further hand raised for item 1.
Thank you, Angela. Paul, would you like to respond to any of those 3 questions or 3 topics?
I'd like to just take a quick attempt at 2 of the great questions as always, and some great points. 2 of them I think I just wanted to speak to. The first was the question about the parallel timeline for FAA publication and what their activities are. So that's a really good point. I know that a lot of members of the public have expressed something similar. One of the reasons why our team is not putting any more detailed information onto the slides is I'm just going to be quite honest, we don't know either. We do work very collaboratively with the FAA, and we're delighted, to have Moifair here today as well, and to have FAA members, working alongside us on the subcommittee. But they don't provide, the airport with any additional information about exactly, where each procedure is in terms of, how it's moving through the quality assurance processes, how it's going through the environmental analysis. If we had that information, and everybody on our subcommittee felt that it was relatively accurate, we would do our best to kind of share that out. But what we've decided to do is when we get, decent information that we feel is ready to share with the public, even if it's slightly in advance of the gateway updates, we take that step. So that's the best that we have, at least from the airport project team. I don't want to put Moifair or others on the spot, but I'll pause there for just a moment if Moifair, if you are interested in offering any additional advice on how difficult or easy it is for the FAA to track specific procedure development timelines. I didn't know if you wanted to jump in.
So I can't speak to any of that right now. And the best way to ask the question is to send it via email or the portal and make those requests. So then we could track it. We could put a tracking number on it just so that it's tracked and it's timely. So that's the only thing I could offer right now.
Cool. Thanks, Moifair. Sorry to put you on the spot with that one, but
That's fine.
No, I appreciate that answer. So I think the best answer then that you're offering is to make sure that to Jennifer Landesman that specific question gets submitted either through email to Moifair directly or through the IFP gateway, and then they can officially track it and get you a prompt response, an accurate response to your question. For the other one that I wanted to just maybe take a shot at about the down the bay versus the down the bay 1 example, where to Mary Jo's question, you're absolutely right. We are already working on a 2A concept for a procedure that has not yet been, as a modification of a procedure that has not yet been published. The process that we go through in terms of which procedures our project team is bringing forward to the public is that we take the technical concept, either that's been expressed to us through words or pictures. We take it through TERPS and PBN criteria. We put it in front of our flight procedure subcommittee, which has air traffic representatives, airline representatives, procedure development, criteria manufacturers, and we ask them all to review it primarily for technical and usability and safety pieces, right? So the main challenge that we had in talking about adding to a left to the down the bay procedures was that vectoring issue. So there was a higher technical interest in exploring down the bay procedures to 2.8 right, because there's no, there's a specific flow of aircraft that it's slightly easier, so I understand, for the TRACON to work with in terms of getting those aircraft to make that turn and stay lined up to 2.8 right, because it's the closer runway to the bay. And when we talked about that as a flight procedure subcommittee team, about what would it take to get them into 2.8 left, there was a lot of concern about how they would be able to train their existing controllers and what the staffing levels would look like in order to have those aircraft intentionally kind of cross over to the 2.8 left stream. And so the feedback we got was that it wasn't ready from a technical standpoint for our team to put it out there for 2A review. And that's why we need to gather that data about how are those procedures working to 2.8 right first, how easy or hard is it, and how safe is it in terms of separating the aircraft. If it's working really well, then we'll go through that process that we looked at to try to implement it as quickly as we can shortly thereafter. So that's why DB and DB1, because they were both to 2.8 right, were a little bit easier for us to do in terms of getting the permission from the flight procedures subcommittee to put it out for community feedback, as opposed to trying to get, the down the bay approach to 2.8 left. That was more challenging, and we didn't reach a consensus from our subcommittee to do that. Bert, is there anything else that I might have missed that in that response, or other questions we wanted to tackle?
I don't know if you want to address, or Bert want to address with the athlete's question about, or request monitoring, averaging metric instead of single event. As far as, getting the proper data, and how do you know the impact of just having it on the average?
Actually, Christian, would you mind stepping in for that one?
Not at all, Bert. Thank you. So that question has come up before and during meetings. It's also during the Q&A section of our website, and we're trying to answer
We
it.
can't hear you well, Christian. Very, very muted, kind of. Can you speak a
Can you hear
bit
me?
louder? Yeah,
Yes,
that's perfect.
now we can.
Thank you.
Can you hear me okay now?
Yes.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay. So we tried to answer this question previously. We've done so at meetings and also the Q&A section of the website. As a whole, we want to compare the procedure as a whole, and for that we need lots and lots of samples so we can compare non-GLS approaches to GLS approaches. And the report's going to be concise and succinct, and have one average noise level for the duration of the monitoring period. The report will also have every single event for non-GLS approaches and GLS approaches. What we don't want to do is compare one individual non-GLS versus one GLS approach, because that's all you're doing, comparing two flights. You're not comparing the procedure as a whole, as it is being performed by a specific aircraft type and pilot and airline. So if you compare a single event to a single event, you might also get into you might also get a high and a low, which won't be a good fair comparison, apples to apples. They have to be more compared as a global procedure instead of single events. But those will be in the report for folks to look at and compare.
How do we then address really capturing more realistic of what people experience on the ground from the noise if we just go on with the average? I know you don't want to compare, one event by one event necessarily. You talk about the entire procedure, but if one event is extremely noisy and disruptive, and you're not able to capture that, how do you know that this procedure is?
Well, that loud event will be captured by the microphones. And if it's an outlier, we want to investigate why that happened. On the high end and even the low end, we want to understand why there are outliers, and if they're away from what we are expecting, we want to investigate that. So the actual noise that people will be hearing on the ground will be captured by the 4 microphones.
Thank you. Good. Okay. Anything else?
Well, I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understood that. So are you actually capturing some noise events if they're at a certain sound, certain level?
Absolutely. So
The Omatics, yes.
We are, okay. Thank you.
And that's reported someplace.
in the report.
It's a later in the report, more the detailed report.
Now, the LMAX, like compared to an above, what's the difference? Is LMAX really reflective of completely what an above or not really?
Well, you can use LMAX in and above, but what LMAX is, it's the peak of that event. How loud that was. That's all that is. Now, if we had, that's your and above. How many of those went above that decibel level you're looking at?
Okay. Thank you. Anything else in the room? Seeing none, nobody online, already closed public comment. Thank you so much, Paul and Christian, for being with us. Appreciate all the information you provided, and obviously we look forward to more in the future as things develop. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving on to next item, item number 2, which is flight procedure, flight tracks, and airport directive report data. With us here, Bert Ganoung is gonna present this to us. And Bert, before we move forward, obviously, I'll ask you now, and then I'll kind of do a little bit of introduction in there. Would you like us to kind of pretty much what we did with Paul, as we have the questions arise, stop you?
I like that, yes,
You like that.
please.
Wonderful.
I'm good with that,
Thank
so.
you. So we're pleased to welcome you, Bert, with us here, and you're gonna be providing us with detailed overview of flight procedure in the Bay Area, some example of flight tracks, and we'll spend some time reviewing in detail the many charts in the SFO directive report.
I hope.
I hope we also too, and this will be an opportunity for each of us to clarify our understanding of how the Bay Area airspace works and how to best read these reports, so we get a better idea of how these flight tracks affect our revenue.
Correct.
So Bert, please go ahead, the floor is yours.
So, I'm not bagging on Paul. What he had to say was very important, and I think that we needed to see all of that. What I am saying is that, oops, I need to do a share screen before I do that. Is that, the information I have, I'm fine with coming back. I can chunk up what I have. I don't want to drag race through it, so everybody feels like, what did I just hear? So I will go as quickly as I can, hopefully covering everything. If we get real close to 5 o'clock, we may say timeout, and we'll push this to the next one.
And then for now, I mean, we have time. I really don't want you to run through it. I'd rather go through what we need with in a meaningful, comprehensive way.
Amen.
And if there's a good stopping point halfway or logically, tell us, and that's what we'll carry forward for the future.
Right. All right, let's go full screen. Okay. So, are you seeing full screen? Yes, you are. Very good. The beauty of an in-person meeting, you can look over your shoulder and see what the person has going on.
See what it looks like.
Yeah. Hey, how's that look? All right, so the agenda today is to just do a deep dive into our director's report, so we can talk about each of the components. I'm looking for questions as we go, like I mentioned earlier. After that, we would hopefully get into the layout of the SFO runways and arrivals and departures. Truthfully, in my opinion, those 3 alone can occupy an hour and a half, 2 hours, if you do it right. So let's keep going and see what we get. So the cover of the director's report is meant to bring everybody in, let you know what Roundtable is presented at, what the information is from. And as we get into the director's report, the first page is the aircraft noise level summary page. And on this page, what we're looking at is, starting at the top left, the map of the peninsula with our noise monitors depicted on it. So we have 29 noise monitors up and down the peninsula. And the coloring, as it grows on them, is darker it gets, you're seeing a higher decibel level. And so typically closer into the airport, right under the departure path, you're going to see the louder noise. And that's what that's showing. The, pardon me, graph to the right we're looking at nighttime number above 55 decibels as a daily average. And so this was brought in with what we're doing now as in above. So the number above 55 decibels. So if you take a look at the noise monitor on the left column and the
NMT is the number associated with each of the permanent monitors.
NMT stands for Noise Monitoring Terminal. And as you go to the right, obviously we're getting higher values. So the different shapes you see there are going to be indicating the period of time we're looking at. So just to the left of the NMT column, you will see 2022, Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, and then we step into 2023 with Q1 and 2. Each of those symbols is depicted on that line. And that's what we're looking at. Let's go ahead and jump to the bottom left, if there are no questions there. Please.
Can we talk about the contents of this?
I don't know, what do you want to know?
Well, I mean, layperson, I'm just kind of taking a look at this and trying to decide. In the first 1 through 6 or 7, or 1 through 6, are those all gap monitors for the most part?
Yes, typically.
So that the Q2 upside down triangles in yellow that are much higher is probably, is that related to when we had our runway closure and we used so much more 2-8 departures?
Exactly.
Okay. So the causation is not necessarily readily apparent, but that seems like a not a one-off, but an unusual circumstance. Are there any other things in here that you can point to that show us kind of an unusual?
Well, definitely, we're looking at the foul weather we had into the Q4 of 2022 and the Q1 of 2023. We were doing a lot of 2-8 offs. And the reverse, and then we did reverse flow arrivals as well, which would have bumped those values up too. So that's an interesting thing to look at. We've received already some guidance from the public on recommendations that they might like to see differently. But what we need to do is make sure that, I think, in my opinion, that this soaks in for a little bit. People get used to it and see what they're seeing here and digest it a bit. For me, the first time I saw this graph, I was a little overwhelmed, to be honest with you. Now, the next page, which we'll get to in a moment, that one was a whole lot easier to digest for me. And so we'll talk about that one in a moment.
Now, on these, on this map, on this chart, there's a threshold or there's not a threshold? Well, 55 is the threshold. Is that how we view that?
We're looking at a number of events above 55 decibels. So yes, you would say 55 is the low end.
And yeah.
And we'll get into that on the next page too, because not many of our events go below.
So Bert, just help me understand. So if I looked on your chart on the right.
Yes.
And just take one of the yellows, the Q2 of 2023.
Sure.
What is that? I guess category 7 there on the yellow. What is that telling me?
So noise monitoring terminal 7.
Yep.
That would be in Brisbane.
And
what we're looking at is approximately 27 or so events above 55 decibels on a daily average.
But where do you get the 27 at on yours?
The bottom column, you see the bottom row, you see 0, 10, 20, 30.
Oh, I see it. Okay. So we're saying on the monitor 7, on the Q2, we had
It's a little above halfway between 20 and 30, So I'm guessing 27 or so.
27 above. Okay, I got you. Okay.
So going down to number 12, monitor 12, which is Foster City, they are obviously getting a lot of overflights over 55. They're on the far over. Why do we have the yellow so far to the left for the last quarter? When we had, these, am I being coded in asking them?
So you're asking, why is it below the bulk
Yeah,
of them to the right?
why is that so much of an outlier, both the green and the yellow?
Well, I would have to say that, the numbers have come down. As far as the ones to the right, I know for a fact, some of those are because of our departures that we were doing, during reverse flow. So it's gonna push those out to the right.
Runway 10.
Foster City doesn't typically get a departure,
Yeah.
but when they do, they're like,
Yeah.
just like the gap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what we're looking at when we look at those things. Like I said, kind of easier to see when you look at it, maybe 2, 3 at a time. When we're looking at 6 here, it's a little rough. And it was rough for me too.
I'm just trying to figure out if there's some way I can view trends in a way that I'm not seeing it quite yet.
Well, we'll talk about that some more.
All right.
Some people have given us some good suggestions already. And we're wondering about maybe we can go forth with those.
Okay.
So, please.
One more question. I didn't understand monitors 1 through 6. What did you say they were?
Mainly gap. So you can see 1, 5, 4, 2, 6.
What do you mean by
Taking off
gap?
on runway 3.
Going out through the gap.
Straight
Right
up.
Oh, going
to-
up through the gap.
Towards the ocean. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, I got you.
And that's truly where most of the monitors are clustered, out that direction.
Gotcha.
And those are the houses that are primarily.
Most of them have
noises.
been mitigated, yes. Yeah, over 15,000. So, ready to jump to the bottom of the page there where we're talking about our significant exceedances? All right. So in this part, we're looking at both NPD, noise power distance, and a need. And we're doing a visual comparison here. The NPD monitors we're looking at how many have gone above thresholds. With a NEAM, that threshold floats. It will then adjust based on what's going on. And you can see there are many fewer under a NEAM than we have for NPD. We've been using NPD for years. And so the reason being is we only have 1.5 years of a NEAM data. And that's why you're seeing a whole row and a half versus the 4 years that you have above it with NPD. But the nice thing about it is you can see some comparisons, you can see some differences in it. NPD is an older method of doing things. It is totally threshold based, meaning that the monitors have a set threshold. Anything that goes above that is going to be triggered and captured as exceedance. And then when you look at a need, it is allowed to flow. And that's based on if there are a whole lot of noisy community events, the threshold will come up a bit to try and help separate the aircraft out of that. So separating the wheat from the chaff is the best way to explain it. And the nice thing about a NEAM is it uses a modeled example of that type of aircraft to compare it to in that event. And so it says, I have an A320 here. Yes, it fits that profile. I'm going to call that an A320. And hopefully when it comes back in our system, it is an A320, which I haven't seen it do differently, but yeah, it's very good and very accurate with that.
So the threshold is compared, so the exceedance is comparing the noise data captured based on a known aircraft model and comparing that to the actual data created.
An event, not.
An event.
Yeah, so
A noise
we
event.
work off of a noise event. Yeah.
Okay. So,
Wouldn't call it exceedance at that point.
And that's a NEAM only.
For the model, yeah. NPD uses some smarts to help it along, but it's not fully as smart as it needs. All right.
I'm sorry, how are the thresholds set for NPD?
All right, so we went through and did a lot of work with our vendors, both the ANOMS provider and our consultant. We looked at where the sweet spot is for community level versus aircraft. You typically want to have a 10 dB separation to easily pull them out. Can't always get that if you want to really get a good count of how many airplanes are doing this. So we tried to pull that close, and at times we got within, say, 5-6 decibels instead of 10 to get that real good number. People were not liking the way we were doing it before, where we did have a higher separation, and we were missing out on counts of aircraft. The old adage was, well, if you want to count the aircraft, we'll just count the flight tracks going over. No. We want ANOMS to give you the number and give it the college try with giving it the decibel level to go with it. And as far as what we're doing with trying to pull them together is that's where we work with the ANIM quite well. But NPD, it's threshold based, waits for it to go above, and then it pulls down. Now, the document we published had all that information. Oftentimes we had, I think it was 10, either way, sort of the sweet spot, so that people could see how we arrived at where we arrived at for where the threshold needed to be set. And that's where thresholds were coming. Now, as far as we really rely on the ones that are within our noise content, it's about 11 of them that we right near the airport. The others are pretty much pure ANIM. We do provide the NPD values on the others so that people can see what we've been doing and keep it consistent there.
And what's the thought for this exceedance, NPD exceedances? What this gives us information that helps us understand what?
We've reported NPD exceedances for years. And this is significant exceedances so people can see how many airplanes went above the threshold, basically. Now, when we're comparing NPD versus ANIM, we're going lower. They will see higher numbers of airplanes, but they will also see too, in certain occasions, where the decibel level comes down, but the number of airplanes goes up. And that I think has confused some people because they're like, well, wait a minute, I'm seeing so many more airplanes, but I'm seeing a lower decibel level. Yeah, it's because the airplanes are blending into the community at that point, or almost. All right, shall we move on to the next page? All right, so here's where we really show the ANOMS and ANIM. We brought this one about 1.5 years ago, the top table. We run across from left to right. We're looking at the average number of noise events. We're looking at the community noise equivalent level, which is the 24-hour average done over a month. We also look at single event level. The LMAX, which is the peak of that event. The SEL brings into account duration, and that's why if you took that 82 decibels and squished it into a 1 second event, even though it was actually 8 or 10, it becomes 93. And so that's the decibel addition and magic of the metrics. We look at community noise in both CNEL and ambient, and that one's kind of a tough one, mainly because the community is easy to do, but when you look at the far right, we're looking at ambient. Ambient's what's left. So if I have aircraft noise and I have community noise, all right, those two we can comprehend. But ambient, what's ambient? That's pretty much, if you were there totally still and you listen to the birds, the crickets, just the natural occurrence, that's ambient. And so that's been fun to pull out of the community, aircraft, and total. You add up community and aircraft, and typically what's left subtracted from the total is your ambient. And on the right, we're getting into the anemia numbers. So on site one, yeah, pretty accurate with the count, number of events, 226 under NPD versus 223 with anemia. The CNELs, bang on, 74. SEL, same. And then the LMAX, 82, same thing. So that's one of those sites. Now let's go, I don't know, let's go to 13 up in Hillsborough. So if you look under the ANUM system using NPD, we counted 2. CNEL was about 35. SEL, 79, 65, LMAX, 57 on the CNEL, and ambient was about 42. And you keep running across and you're gonna see 41 events versus 2, 46 decibels versus 35. So we went up by 11 dB on CNEL. And then 72 versus 79. So we kind of came down, as you see, we're getting more of those quiet events in there. And then 60 on the LMAX versus 65. So that's where you see that float difference when you're getting into the anemia. It's fun.
So that, in that case, we've got more flights, but lower noise level.
Right.
altogether. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm getting a little dry here.
Lower noise level. Something, but not on CNEL. There's more.
Yeah. And you know why that is?
No.
Okay, so let's think about CNEL. CNEL works off of 3 periods of the day.
Right.
So we're working 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., which is straight number. So if I had a event that was 75 decibels, it's gonna be 75. Now, between 7 p.m. and 10 p.m., 75 now is multiplied by 5. So it's then has that penalty to it. And then at nighttime, it's 10 times. So it's equivalent of basically 10 of those 75 decibel events. And so that's why when you get into that, we've caught a few night events in there, push that CNEL.
So in this column, we're reporting CNEL and the community under the ANOMS for the 57 for this Hillsborough. Has that been multiplied by 10 for a portion of the day?
Yeah.
And then by 5 for another portion?
Right, yeah.
So it's almost is it a useful figure for what we're?
Well, it depends. I mean, if you have a community that has loud events going on at night, then yeah, it is. Because you're gonna have a hard time pulling aircraft noises out of that. If you follow me there. Now, let's go out to Portola Valley Woodside and look at some of those portable reports we have out there. Oh my gosh, it's quiet. And you don't really realize how loud crickets are until you listen to them in headphones. Man, when they go off and they're right under the microphone, they're loud. So, yeah, anyway. Now, let's drop to the bottom. We're gonna see the SFO and above NPD and the SFO and above ANEM. First, what I would like to do is start with site 1. We'll look at the min-max, LMAX column. Now, what we're doing there is people want to know what the low end of that was. So pretty much here, the low end was 66 decibels. Max would have been 101. And when you look at the ANEM, it goes down to 56 decibels and 101. So the line on the top end. And as you run across, how many events were 55 decibels or louder? Same as 60. same as 65. And that's where you run into that bottom end of 66. Then you start to see numbers fall off with the 70. And then as you get to 75, you see it go down. And then you get to 80, you see it go down even more. So that's what people are trying to see there, is how many events were in what range. And you can see 66. Just after the 65 is where it starts to drop off. And it varies as you go down. I mean, gosh, you go down, let's go back to Hillsborough. 59 decibels at site 13. And then when we look at the and above, we're looking at 54 on the lower. 53. So they're pretty close, right? A little lower on the knee. But when you look at the number of events at 55 and above, 980 versus 27. So a need's really starting to shine at some of these quiet sites. Where it's close into the airport, I think NPD does a little bit better, personally, from what I've seen and working with these newer numbers. But that's generally how to read the in above, number above. We're looking at how many decibels and where it starts to drop off, and that's where you go, aha, there's the magic point. All right, no questions? Wait, okay, I'm waiting.
So, there's probably a way mathematically using the name section to just say, to be able to extrapolate, noise monitor 1. So extrapolate, just use the 75 dBA number to the 80 dBA number to say how many planes were.
What your delta is?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that'd be a whole nother chart.
But I mean, it's, you've got the data here from which you could draw.
No, yeah.
So
I mean,
you could just.
well, we could also make this report as thick as a small phone book.
I just want to understand that I understand the relationship.
Yeah, but I'm just saying
Yeah.
that there is so much data here backing this up. We could produce a phone book monthly. And nobody would have any time to read it, let alone the time they have right now to make it to a meeting and do it.
But if somebody said, hey, I'd like to know how many planes at noise monitor 12 are between 70 and above 70.
Yeah.
And
Right.
between there. Okay.
Yeah.
So make sure I understand this, Bert. So getting back to your, so on Hillsborough number 13, there are 27 events
Right.
on, at what time period for the day, 24 hours?
Month.
For the month, there are
Right.
27.
These are
monthly. 27 events for the month that exceeded 55. And underneath, there were 980 events for the month that exceeded 55.
You got it.
And now, again, I'm lost. What, tell me the difference? Why is one 980, why is the other one 27?
Because what well, let's go back to how does NPD work?
Okay.
So we have a noise event happen. It then in our system goes and looks for a flight track.
Okay.
And it tries to put those two together, correlate.
Okay.
Now, with NPD, it has a lot of lacking on it. So if it didn't have enough time before it got to 55 to really get there, it will have a problem. Now with a NEAM, since it will allow its threshold to slide down, it'll open it up earlier and you catch that event. Whereas NPD will be static. I gotta be at 60 before it gets above and then boom. So you can then pull out the 55 out of that. And so with a NEAM, it gives you that flexibility to go pull that threshold down to the community and then find those.
So the NEAM is much more accurate
At quiet sites.
at quiet sites,
In my opinion, yeah. After looking at the data and working with it, yeah, that's pretty much the long and the short of it.
And in the gap departure, less.
It'll be pretty close.
Okay.
We've done, like I said, we've done a lot of work working that thresholds. So kind of close.
Well, we're at the
At 5
5 o'clock.
o'clock, that's
Yeah.
actually a good place to stop if you wanna save the rest of this for
Yeah,
another.
definitely. I mean,
We got
much to
through
learn.
the big meat.
Yeah.
This is helpful, by the way, very helpful. Bill.
Good.
I appreciate this.
Anytime.
We have these on digital, right? And we could blow them up.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
whatever, if you're gonna use the same charts, we'll make them bigger.
Well, thank you, Bert. That was all, but of course, to be continued. But time is catching up with us, so I really appreciate that. Let me open it up to any more questions here. Let me open it up to public, Angela, and then we'll move to the number 3 on our agenda.
Thank you, Chairman. We do have 3 virtual hands raised for item number 2, so I will first call on Darlene Diatley, followed by Mr. Peter Grace. Ms. Diatley?
First of all, bravo for having a NEAM. This is a really big deal to have accurate information, and it fits perfectly with the noise policy review because it shows you that the impacts at the airport using DNL and the impacts away from the airport using and above, and how significant this is, and that the number of events for people away from the airport is what they're bothered by that gets lost in DNL. That's why it's so perfect to have this data. I think at an executive level, I think it's useful to step back and say, what is it you want to know? What trends do you want to know and what questions do you have to ask? Because you could actually make a proposal of what you think the threshold should be from away from the airport by looking at this data. I mean, this is amazing. So yes, there's a lot of data and it's overwhelming, but I think at a strategic level, ask yourselves, what is it you want to know? Because this is why we have the data to make executive decisions and to understand. And that's where the focus should be. We can get lost looking at the chart, but step back and say, what is it you want to know? And just some minor things. I don't know why it's only nighttime. We need nighttime and daytime. And, did you penalize nighttime for and above, or is it just penalize in CNEL? Is the community noise just looking at NPD have an influence on determining community noise versus if you just did a NEAM? So again, you have 2 different noise environments near the airport and away, 2 different metrics that diagnose it differently, and 2 different thresholds to determine the level of impacts. And it fits squarely with what the Roundtable's noise policy review comments were. It's just that this now gives you data to substantiate that. Thank you.
Hang on, Ms. Yaffe, a second.
Darlene, I have a question for you. So you mentioned that the disparity of comparing night and day.
No, I was saying DNL near the airport, like you said, DNL is more accurate near the airport. Is that?
Well, I'm saying that NPD is more accurate near the airport.
Yes.
Not just NPD.
Okay, I'm making 2 comments. NPD is more accurate near the airport, and DNL captures the lived experience better near the airport and away from the airport. NPD is not as accurate, and the metric should be and above away from the airport. So yes, there's a metric, and then there's a methodology for monitoring.
Copy that. Thank you.
No, thank you for asking.
Thank you, Ms. Yackley. So I will now call on Mr. Peter Grace, followed by Mary Jo Fremont. Mr. Grace?
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much, Bert, for your presentation. There is so much there that I'd like to ask about, such as on the top of page 7, the graph on the top right, why noise events went up in Brisbane, monitor number 7, and went down in monitors 23, 24, and 20. But what I really want to talk about is if the goal of the director's report is to give the members of the roundtable the information they need to answer their constituents' questions about what has been done to reduce noise, the current report needs further fleshing out. No single event is identified. The deep dive presented is too aggregated and unspecific. As Darlene said, if the focus is on what you want to know, I'd like to give the public input. What I'm interested in is what was that aircraft that created the noise event at 2 a.m. that woke me up? I want to identify the offending aircraft and then find out what steps are being taken to mitigate. I've seen steps taken in the past to include flying the procedure better or changing the procedure selected or that was forced. It's not all gloom, however. There is salvation, as pointed out, and NEAM identifies every aircraft which creates each noise event at each monitor. Knowing what aircraft that created each noise event has profound implications for what the director's report could present. Let me step back. Would you be, as a member of the Roundtable, be interested in identifying those aircraft that disturb your constituents' sleep, i.e. that 2 a.m. flight that I opened with? Going further, I suggest that a NEAM data can be used to identify those aircraft that created noise events between the sleeping hours, and then the Roundtable can work on mitigating. When we know what a NEAM can do, then we can redesign the director's report and not shoehorn a NEAM data into the current director's report format based on average. I need to readjust that, Bert, because you have given information in a way that's really helpful. And Bert, I would like to be included in the public recommendations about what the director's report would do. I'm not aware of being asked. If I had, my memory's dropped, has fallen. And I really believe it should be a public discussion that's shown across, so people can work off each other. I would also like to reiterate a plea I've made, and that is, while the graphs are great with yellow, and particularly identifying on page 7, the top right graph, the problem is that when I print this report out with my black and white printer, it all becomes gray. I can't identify. And I believe the report needs to be redesigned to allow for the less fortunate of us to be able to read the report easily when published. This is a big social issue, social justice issue for me. So thank you very much. So I would like to see more details on what planes created the noise events to give something to be chewed on and allows us to work on that. And secondly, I'd like to see the reports designed so they can be read in black and white. Thank you very much for letting me step over.
Thank you, Mr. Gray. So I will call on the last virtual hand, and that is Ms. Mary Jo Fremont. Ms. Fremont?
Thank you. I've already emailed. Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I've already emailed today the chair, vice chair, and coordinator of the roundtable some suggestions. I've also copied Bert. I'll just highlight what I suggested for the other attendees. I had 3 recommendations on the and above reporting. One is to report the daily and above instead of a monthly and above, because people relate to daily number. I know my daily number of flights. I don't know my monthly. And you should do it also in 5 dB LMAX bands, because you want to be able to see things not in a table. I can't do anything with that table unless I want to analyze the data. So that was great. But you want a graph, and that's why you want the bands. And that the bands will show you how the noise is distributed. 200 events between 75 and 90 dB is not the same as 200 events between 55 and 60. You want to show that. The other request I had or suggestion was to add the ambient noise level at each monitor location in the above and above table. And it seems it's written on the NPD table, but I couldn't understand why it wouldn't be on the ANIM table. I missed it because NR Suite can calculate ambient noise based on the recording. That's automatically done with software. And then the other thing is the monitor, the portable monitor should also have the and above data reporting, not just the permanent monitor. So the same format should apply. Then I had a question, two comments on the 9 time and above 55 dB, where you talked a lot about Bert. Is it on LMAX? Is it on SEL? I have no idea what the 55, it's and above what? An LMAX number, an SEL number would be important to know. And I don't know why it's only nighttime, because it should be, if you do nighttime, then you should do daytime, and then you can do the 24 hours if you want. And then most importantly, if you penalize in CNAIL, you penalize for nighttime and evening time. You get another 10 dB or another 5 dB if it's evening. You need to also penalize your LMAX on the and above for the nighttime. This is really important to compare apples to apples. If you have a nighttime penalty, you add the 10 dB to the LMAX of that event when it's at night, or you add 5 dB to the LMAX of that event when it's in the evening between 7 and 10. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fremont. And with that, Chairman, we have no further hand raised.
Thank you, Angela. Bert, any response that you have to the question?
I was gonna say that we have the daily average, but that's nighttime only. You did mention you would like to see both daily, day and night. Like I said, we're gonna be growing this thing real quick if we don't get our control over it. I do agree with Mr. Grace that this in particular, and if we go to a daytime, it's gonna really get busy. So we might have to thin it down and not have so many years or quarters visible. Maybe try 4, see what happens. But yeah, we'll take all these down. I do have your email, Ms. Fremont, and we'll go from there.
Bert, one of the things that was asked, I think you should know, I hope you do, and that's what is the levels at LMAX or SDL that you're doing the and above with?
LMAX.
Thanks.
Okay, anything else here in the room? Thank you for members of the public who asked their questions and joined us and participated. Thank you, Bert, for your presentation. Very informative. Again, more to follow to continue the discussion. It's not ending today. Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you, Angela, and Vice Chair Al. Thank you for being here. With that, we're gonna call it a day, and thank you all for joining us. This meeting is adjourned.